Today on the Idiot's Guide, we're talking about the art of negotiating with a teenager's brain. How-tos, how not tos, we have all those deets today. And monkey business is pretty serious business if you ask anyone, especially if it involves a revenge plot to remove every wild dog in a nearby village by tossing them off high roofs and treetops. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, a.k.a. the Profit Hacker, and I'm joined by the man in charge, Mr. Joe Haslam. Welcome to the Idiot's Guide. Well, this episode started off because of a question that you actually asked my son. Basically asking him a question about what kind of podcast he would first off listen to or be interested in. You know, what is something that he would want to hear about?
Yeah.
And his answer was, you know, basically kind of a parenting coach, like, you know, coaching parents on listening skills and having a therapist, like those two strong things. You know, I mean, like that's really been where, you know, he's a big advocate for it. So honestly, like I like that he was pretty forthcoming, pretty like right to the point about it. And I appreciate that. Like I know that you didn't want just some glossy teenage answer like, I don't know, I hate podcasts, you know, like some angsty teenager thing. No, like this, you know, I hope is something that maybe I would be able to go back and tell my son. I was like, hey, you should listen to this and critique it and see if we even came close to what you were talking about. So,
yeah.
But you know, we do hope that in this episode, you know, the goal is for us to at least give you some tasty morsels of how to negotiate with those terrorists, or I mean teenagers. Sorry.
Well, and I think it's an important thing. You know, we were talking about, you know, what kind of topics do we want to talk about on the podcast, and I am just going to give a shout out. Anyone listening to the podcast, watching on YouTube, if you've got ideas for topics for us to, you know, talk about on the podcast, we're always interested in hearing what you want to hear about. You know, the whole idea is, you know, we're idiots the same as everyone else in this world. We just may be a little bit further down the road. And so if there's anything that you've got questions on, anything at all, put it in the comments. So comment on this. Let us know what you want to hear.
Hey, if you're there, real quick, also subscribe, like. You know, hit the little bell, that little dingy bell thing, because that's really helpful too. It'll let you know when our next episode, we try to post pretty consistently every single week unless one of us is dead. And I think we're both here, so we're good. We're pretty good about that. So, you know, if you like what you hear, you know, subscribe and we'll try to keep it relevant. And we're going to listen to your comments. If you have something to say, be it good, bad, critical, whatever it is, let us know. We'd love to engage.
If I talk too much, put it in the comments. We do really want to know.
Yes. There's a timer. I'm watching the clock. Like I can't. It just doesn't stop it. It's still there.
And that's the thing. I mean, we're idiots too. So, you know, critique us. Tell us what we need to learn. But this is essentially what we did with your son. Is, you know, we were talking about, you know, what kind of topics would he want to hear from two middle-aged guys. And that was the thing, communication between parents and kids. And that right there, I think is one, as a parent, having that open dialogue with your kids. What should we talk about? What is it that you want to hear from us? What is it that you want as part of our family life?
Yeah.
That's an important thing to talk about. And so, I mean, if nothing else from that takeaway or from the rest of this podcast, so if you stop listening now, please don't. But if you stop listening now, that's the takeaway. Talk to your kids about what they want to talk about.
I think that's a lot of license right there. Like I mean, I have a 15-year-old, so and you have some teenagers in your house. So, you definitely, there's a lot of things that, both my teenagers want, don't mind talking about. And for the most part, I think that statement is right. But then every once in a while, I was like, you shut your face. I don't want to hear that coming out of your mouth again. Like, I don't say that, but I do. I'm like, there are some things that I'm like, okay, no, we're not going there. Like, no, la, la, la,
and this is one thing. I mean, I've got all girls, but talking about periods in the house, talking about any of, women's health, anything like that, those are all open topics.
I think I joke about it. Even with my kids, I joke about it, but it has more to do with the fact that they feel comfortable talking to me about anything.
That's exactly it.
That's what it's about.
And so even if it might make you uncomfortable, it doesn't make me uncomfortable at all, but if it ever makes you uncomfortable, just be open with your kids. Let them know, oh, that's a little uncomfortable of a topic, but I'm glad you're talking to me about this and help me work through my being uncomfortable with it. Because if you're uncomfortable with it and they're trying to talk to you about it, they may then feel bad or feel uncomfortable about talking about that thing with anyone. You're the first line of defense in their everyday life about their communication skills. And so when you're open to talk about those kinds of things and you're open about even your squeamishness, I know there are a lot of dads out there who do not like talking about periods. And I just use that as an example because it is such a squeamish topic for many, many dads. Even some moms, they don't like to talk about this kind of stuff.
I kind of find that, I grew up with sisters, so it's maybe I'm a little bit different in this capacity, but I think about how I never really was squeamish about that, other than the fact of like, I'm very unqualified if I'm asked to go buy hygiene products.
Oh yeah.
And usually to the most part, like there was one time I remember an old story years ago that I was asked to go find certain things and I was given a task to find it, instructed on what it was. And when I got there, I saw the Wall O feminine hygiene and that thing was massive. There was so many choices. I was like, wings, extra pads, super absorbent, heavy flow. Okay. So, and by the time I literally like flagged someone down and said, I don't have the parts to be here. Can you help me, please?
And just being open in that communication, just being willing to even just discuss your own squeamishness with that's important. And it could be anything. It could be talking about horror movies. It could be talking about their sex life. It could be talking about really anything.
Yeah.
Just being open to talking about that is so important. And being honest about it. If you're squeamish about talking about any of this stuff, tell your kids. They'll understand. Just like Adam was surprised that his son had such an insightful topic.
Yeah, I was really quite blown away and revealing of myself, in the process.
There are a lot of things that we discount teenagers in their ability to have those really good thoughts. And how understanding they really are.
They say kids say the darndest things, but I think teenagers say darnder things.
There you go.
Yeah.
But
darnder's not a word, but it is today.
There you go.
Yeah.
We make up words all the time.
Yeah.
But they will be open with you. They'll be understanding if you say, it's not my area of comfortability. Let's talk to someone else, or, just be understanding that this is making me squeamish. I hate horror movies. That's one thing that I have a hard time talking about is, like psychological thrillers, those kinds of horror movies, because it's so, I do a lot of research on the brain and all that stuff. And so watching those movies, it's like extra intense, even when they're just talking about it. So that always makes me squeamish. Most people, horror movies, anything like
Everyone,
that.
it's just, that was extra splashy. And you're like, yeah, but what's going on in that kid's brain? Like, is real bad,
Right. What's the impact of this? What's the trauma impact? What are they going to be doing later in life? I mean, what's all this impact?
How is that person's not going to recover from this murder scene?
Right. And so those are my thoughts. I get very concerned. And so,
they're actors, Joe. Actors.
I know, but it's just one of those things where everyone has their uncomfortable conversations, but being open about Yeah, that's not necessarily my area of, or that is my area of squeamishness.
I agree. Like my wife and I have a very differing perspective about that. I grew up in a household that was not hack and slasher watcher. Like we watched Hocus Pocus, and that's like the scariest thing, you know. My wife grew up like as a little girl watching very, very horrible slasher movies. And so we have this mixed bag at home where my oldest teenager is now like, I like these. These are cool. And I was like, yeah, but my other teenager, he's like, yeah, I don't really care for them. They're not my jam. And I was like, you and I'll get along great. So it's fun. But I think, you know, like one of the things I want to jump in as we do this. I'm kind of following a guide from it's called Newport Academy. It's like a reform school, basically. It's a helpful school for really troubled teens, but this tip list is really good. So I really appreciated it. And I'll add the link in in our details here. But tip number 1, keep your cool and stay centered. Like, honestly, it's like be a role model that you want your kids to be able to be like. You're like, man, I can't wait till I'm a parent and I'm as cool as you are. Like, doesn't mean that you're like, here guys, shots for everyone, you know, but it means that you're not like just offended or appalled when they bring you something about their life. They're bringing you something about their life. Take that. Like,
Yeah.
bring it in and welcome it, and you know, like maybe take a breath, but honestly, just don't take it personal. They're not attacking you. They're actually inviting you into a very inner circle of their life.
And that's a really important thing, is that we may look at this. So here's maybe a bad example, but I think it's a good example. So, you know, cats and dogs, when you have them as pets, if they go and hunt anything outside, a lot of times they will bring it to you and present it to you as a gift.
Yeah.
We as humans see that as, you have presented me with this half-eaten leftover rat, and it's disgusting. When the animal is thinking, I have just presented you with half of something that I went out and hunted myself, and this is the greatest present that I can provide.
I have protected the home from the dragons, and I have provided food to the household at the same time. No.
And so it's kind of the same thing with teenagers, is any opening that they are coming to talk to you about, no matter what it is. I mean, they could even just be angry about something that happened at school and consequently kind of yelling at you about this thing that happened at school, when what's really happening is that they are sharing a piece of themselves with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you may see as this attack or negativity or anything like that is actually the biggest gift that this child can provide to you. And so it's important to recognize that. And like that tip says, not lose your cool when it may be something that you may not like.
I think about, you know, in years past, I've had where it's like, okay, if you're coming to me and you're venting and whatnot. Now, granted, if my kid comes up to me and just lays into me and is just furious, I might want them to take a moment and go calm down a little bit before they deal with that. Only because I still do want to be respected. But in years past, it was like, you will respect me and speak to me accordingly. And, you know, I've had to recognize, just like you said, not to take it personal, but to read that, hey, they're speaking from their day. They're speaking from an experience that they're dealing with. It's not my fault. And, you know, if I need to temper that and be like, hey, it's not my fault. Can we bring the volume down a little bit? You know, I'll try to do that. Or like I said, let's take a break and come back at this. I do want to hear about what's going on. It sounds like it was really stressful, sort of a thing. You're acknowledging the fact that you see them when, you know, when that matters. And that's going to go a long ways, because you know, they oftentimes they recluse, and you're like, well, we never see you in the house. You never come up for dinner. You are always saying lies. I get one word answers to all my questions. I was like, you know, like,
yeah. And it's, you know, a lot of times we ourselves, parents deal with a lot of stress that teens never even recognize. And we get stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are times when a kid comes home and they're stressed and they want to vent to you, and you have also had a stressful day and you are not ready to be vented to.
Yeah.
And just that interaction right there, that, two high charged individuals in that moment can lead from what should be a very communal moment to a very conflicting moment.
Yeah.
Through no fault other than you've both had stressful days. And so that's when it's important to recognize, and I like the advice that you just gave. It's important to recognize, where you're at and what's being asked of you in that moment. And if you're not ready for it, you say, I've also had a really bad day. I hope you can understand. I want to talk to you about this. Let me calm down for a little bit so that I can be in a place where you can vent to me and be frustrated to me.
I promise you,
I'm not going to react to that.
You are safer in 10 minutes from now.
Right. And that openness, now, hopefully it's not starting in teenage years, because that might be a jarring realization for a teenager. But if you start young talking about this and being open about your own emotions, then by that time, they will hopefully have that realization that my parents go through this too. I can step away from that. And any teenagers that are listening to that, if your parent says that to you, it's probably because they are really stressed out and they're trying to protect you by not talking about everything that they're going through. They recognize you've got your issues too, and they don't want to vent to you. They want to be your source of relief. And so they want to be able to withhold a lot of that frustration from you. And so they've got to work on their own thing. And then when they're in that right space, then they're welcoming you in to be able to talk about that and vent about that.
And it works both ways. I mean, like it gives them, if I ask for that time or that space for a moment to kind of take a break and get away, it isn't because I don't want to hear, but at the same time, it's I want them to process it better so they aren't like, all the shields are up, everyone's charging forward, and that's where I'm going to meet you for the day. I'm like, well, like you said, I mean, we both have our stresses. Like, I'm gonna be dealing with what I'm gonna be dealing with, and I don't want you to be met with the same shield wall that I've got up, and so I want to sit down and kind of dismantle that a little bit so that. And that gives you that time at the same time. One of the things that like this also talks about, it says emphasize positive, like positive parenting. And I don't really want to say oh wow, you sure know how to fill a dishwasher. If that works, great. Like most teens are gonna be like, yeah, whatever. But it's more about the practice that you acknowledge that maybe during this time that they had a stressful day, they came to you and they're going after something specific. They had a really bad day and you ask them to take 5. And when they come back, you recognize how calmly or collected they are. You can see the difference in that. That's encouraging to them. That's positive reinforcement for them to go like, I can organize my own thoughts. I have a superpower, whatever it is. But it's finding those things, and this thing is actually like, try this for 30 days. Like, do this, and at least find some sort of strength that you're emphasizing in your teen over the next 30 days, and see what happens. Like, see how much more conversation that expands into, what that becomes. But instead of it just going, all right, Duke's up, let's do this. Come on, tell me about your day. Share with me your day, and I'll share with you mine. And, we're just breathing fire at each other, so.
Yeah, and I do want to read. So this is, so when I was in college, I took it was a child development or human development course. And in that course, the textbook for that was The Developing Person Through the Lifespan by Kathleen Berger. Now, I've kept that textbook with me since I took that class. It's so much that I actually have pictures on my phone of these important sections on dealing with teenagers.
Is that the one you sent me pictures of?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And
that's a very old book. Yeah.
It is a very old book. This was the 6th edition, so that was 2005. There is a newer version, the 12th edition, which is in 2022. Based on the comments and things from the later editions, it's basically the same. I think they've updated maybe some of the statistics or something
the
like
racism out of it.
there wasn't a lot of that. But it does. So it goes over all the different stages of development, and there's, a lot of great information in there. If you get a chance to read that, I wouldn't necessarily go and buy it. I think the 6th edition, I saw it on Amazon for a couple bucks. So
Really?
if you want something like that, I mean, if it's up there, some people were saying they were having a hard time getting them. So I can't necessarily trust what's on Amazon anymore.
Buy it used for $2. And you're like, $2 plus shipping from where? Like Thailand?
It is a textbook. It reads like a textbook, but I found it really helpful. There are a lot of great, helpful advice out there. I'm trying to remember the name. I should have looked this up before. I'll have Adam link it in the description of another author that does really good parenting books.
Okay.
That follow a lot of the same principles that we're talking about. I just can't remember his
Focus on the family. Is that what it? No. Okay.
It's like
so wholesome.
The Whole Brain Child, I think, is one of his books. Really good books.
Okay.
But so this section is called Parent-Adolescent Conflict. As long as parents and adolescents live under the same roof, a certain amount of conflict arises when the young person's drive for independence clashes with the parent's tradition of control. Now, a lot of people will take that negatively, the parents' tradition of control, but that's what we all do. I mean, we're trying to keep them alive for the first 10 years of their life before they reach the teenagerhood because they can't survive on their own. So we control everything about them. We've talked about this on previous podcasts that, when it comes to money, all of a sudden we're no longer supporting them once they turn a teenager and have a job of their own, and how jarring that is. It's because we were controlling everything about their finances. It's not an aggressive control. It's just we have control over it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's no longer there, and they have to control it themselves. And so it's that control. It's not an aggressive control. It's just we have control of their lives, and they want independence. And once they reach that teenager development stage, and that's immediate conflict. It will immediately be conflict. We have the same thing. I don't know that we talked about it too much, but when elderly individuals, we talked about, bad driving, when people need to have their driver's license taken away at a certain age, and their children's are the ones that are then controlling their parents' lives. Yeah. Once they reach that stage to remove that driver's license, it's that control, and there is conflict there that ensues. And then, so it goes on to talk about few parents can resist making a critical comment about the dirty socks on the floor or about the ring on the eyebrow, and few adolescents can calmly listen to expressions of concern without feeling they are being unfairly judged. And that is a reference to Smetana and Asquith in 1994. In general, bickering peaks early in early and mid-adolescence. Family life, normally adjustments occur on both sides. With a child's physical maturity and emotional independence comes mutual appreciation and respect, but this process takes time. Yeah. So just know that conflict happens. Just be patient. Take the time.
Yeah, I think if you shut down conflict, if you shut down you're basically shutting down any kind of communication, because as a teenager, they're trying to experiment with their own independence at all different levels, whether that's making food, sleeping schedule, or going to school. You're going to get resistance in all sorts of directions randomly. There's really no forecast for it either, because I have a 13-year-old that one day he's great, and the next day I'm like, why are you awake? You should go to bed. That's the only thing that's reasonable right now. And it's, for the most part, they're great. But if I didn't know, like if I didn't have the thought process about like these conflicts are natural, they're normal, and they're trying to kind of stretch their wings at an age appropriate style, and they don't know what age appropriate is for themselves. So you're there not to just tie them to their age. You're there to guide them through that age so that they know that the next, thing, like with good rules, good expectations, household things, what's appropriate play, and also what's appropriate for consequences when things happen, those are all important things that really serve the greater good of everything. The other part about it is, all like so far, a lot of this is communicating. We're communicating, how we say things to our kids, how we talk to each other, how we approach frustration together, how do we approach expectation with each other. I think with all of it, even if you're talking positive experiences, you're dealing with somebody that every single emotion that they're dealing with is like on steroids. Mm-hmm. So when they're happy, they don't know that they have puppy feet and they will smash and break everything. Okay? But when they're mad, they don't know they have puppy feet and will smash and break everything. So it's just kind of one of those things.
One of the best things I ever read. Now, I don't have the reference for this. I have looked for the reference for this for years. But in my biology class in 9th grade, the teacher, I don't know if the teacher had brought in a bunch of magazines, science magazines, what it was. But there were a bunch of magazines there. And the one that was at my desk, I picked it up and started reading it. It was on neurological function. So I think this is where all of my fascination with, neural activity and brain function, all that came from. But I read there was an article in there. If anyone can find this, so this would have had to have been, so I think it was like 98, 99. It was a periodical, so it would have been around there or earlier. It had a picture of a brain on the front with a bunch of different colored lines on it. That's all I can remember. If anyone can find it, I would love it because I do want to reread this article. But in the article, they compared the brainwave patterns of teenagers to the brainwave patterns of clinically insane individuals. So people who have clinical insanity, who are in sanitariums. I don't know if that's the appropriate term for it. But people who are, clinically in this situation.
Okay.
And they found that the brainwave patterns of teenagers are more convoluted than those of people in that are clinically insane. And so that right there kind of gives you the picture of what teenagers are going through on a daily basis.
There is a reason why I use the word negotiating, because honestly, that's what you're doing. You have to be fully aware of the fact that this person is not sane.
Yeah. And again, if anyone can find that, I have looked for years. I would love to actually read that article to make sure that I remember it correctly. And just to get where that study came from and all that information, because it was fascinating to me.
Some interesting things. I think kind of maybe this is evidence of that, sanity versus insanity sort of approach. And I'm going to be very delicate about this because this is directly at home. But this week I've been addressing some attendance concerns with my son, and over the last couple of weeks, we've had, illnesses and some different things that have caused classes to be missed. And then earlier this week, instead of going to class, he felt like, he didn't want to be overwhelmed by the teacher asking so many questions about the assignment works that were going on. And so he didn't go, and he missed a test. So he didn't go to the class, and he missed a test for the entire unit. Basically didn't do any work in the entire unit because he hasn't been in class for a couple weeks. And now, I'm getting email communication from the teacher like, hey, is there any time your son is going to be around sometime? And I talked to him about it. And he gave me a story that said that he was in class that day and implied that he was with one of the teacher's aides to go over some material. And so in front of him, I send a reply to the teacher saying all of this information and talking about a couple, like we just had this and what. So some good details, at least to justify why he hasn't been there for weeks. And I get a reply that's, nope, I checked with the aide. He was definitely not there. He actually wasn't there. Finally, I pulled it out of him. But, I just had to sit there and be like, I'm going to give you one more try. You can have a chance for this. What I don't understand, this is the insanity part, where I have complete reason in this. Why, if I make up a lie, am I going to watch somebody confirm the lie to somebody else that's being implicated in that lie, knowing full well that that's exactly what's going to happen is you will be found out? What's better? I mean, I guess what's worse? I look at it and go, you could have told me that you didn't go because you felt like this. And yeah, I'm going to be bothered. But that's where we're at in our communication, that you could tell me this. So when I asked him, I was like, why didn't you? He goes, because I didn't want to get in trouble. I was like, you think you think that's worse? Like, buddy, you have no idea what's coming at this point. Like, this is way worse. You've now brought new parties into this story. Like, this is a problem. So, I mean, he's facing the music of this for the next foreseeable future. But, it's going back and forth about that and just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I think if I take a step back a few years to that same scenario and had me personally been in that scenario at that point, I probably would have, I wouldn't have even seen, I wouldn't be reasonable. Like, just, I kept my cool. He definitely fell apart because I rocked his world. I took things away that I'm like, you won't have this, you won't have this, you're going to have this for the week and yada, yada, yada. And, for the most part, he's been pretty decent. Kind of a pain every once in a while, but he's also a teenager. So, I can't, like we've been talking about, I can't have expectations that he's going to be an angel now that he's screwed up. I was like, no, he's going to try to top it. I'm very sure of that.
Yeah, and that's the thing with teenagers. I mean, in this situation, I mean, they create this environment, this world in their brain that, the teacher's not going to respond and they're going to get away with it. Or maybe by some miracle, they're going to corroborate the story or not be able to corroborate it. And so they get away with it. There are a lot of reasons why they do that. And it's that teenage brain that is just crazy. You can expect them to just not do everything right. They are learning. That's the most important thing. I mean, when it comes to communication, they are learning, just like they're learning social studies, just like they're learning math, just like they're learning science. They have to go through and be taught all of that. And unfortunately, with a lot of this social stuff, when it comes to lying and honesty, when it comes to how to interact with people around them, when it comes to really anything in life and their development, it's a process of they have to be taught. And we as a society don't do a very good job of teaching those things. And so the majority of it has to be learned through experience by making mistakes.
And honestly, I think I don't want to say most, but a lot of parents don't let them get to that point of making mistakes. They're too much of a helicopter.
Yeah.
And you want to protect your kid, but at some point you have to let the line out enough for them to feel that burner's hot.
Yeah. They have to learn.
Yes.
And that comes from experience. They have to make the mistakes. The first step to success is failure.
If it's something that's endangering, please intervene.
Yes.
Absolutely. No question. But if it's something like, you're going to regret that, then they're going to, if they don't, then it's guaranteed to happen again later. So one way or another, they will learn, but better that they learn under that kind of safety net that they're like, man, if this knocks you down, guess who's there to catch you? You know?
And the communication comes in on a lot of those more dangerous things by talking about it, by being open about it. In our society, in the United States specifically, we don't ever talk about sex.
Yeah.
It's a taboo subject from everyone. And by not talking about it, you're opening the doors for, they have to learn by experience. And that's an extremely dangerous topic to learn from experience.
I have a small little thing that I'm not going to go into the details about, essentially the story, but we had a story in the sphere of sex that basically I had a conversation with my son about, and just some experimentation that was done. And in that process, I have to allude really, really good at this because they're kids, and I definitely don't want to.
And just so everyone knows, yes, our kids hate us for talking about them.
No, it was, the conversation was in that nature. Okay. But when we had the conversation, I asked some pretty explicit questions because I wanted to understand the depth of his knowledge. And then afterward, I'm like, yeah, okay, well, you're like, what? This. And after all that, he goes, what, you're not, like, I thought you would just tear my head off. And I was like, why? I'm like, yeah, you did something stupid. Like, you're not, nothing's broken, nothing,
Yeah.
like at the end of the day, like, there are far worse things you could do than just be dumb. Okay. So I'll let you be dumb and sit here and be like, yeah, are you going to do it again? No. Well, you're probably going to do it again. No guarantee. But I don't want this to be something that becomes a negative thing for you, because later on in life, it's a great thing. Right now, I need to teach you the responsibility of it. And me losing my temper doesn't teach you that. Me losing my temper and grounding you just makes you want to go do it more. It's going to drive you in that direction. So rather just go, yeah, what'd you think? Kind of dumb? Yeah, cool. Glad that's your perspective. Let's carry on,
Yeah. And it's that communication. It's just being open to talk about that kind of stuff. Even the things that we may see as awkward or uncomfortable. Talk about it. That's the only way they're going to learn. If you don't ever sit down with them and show them that 2 + 2 = 4, they will never know that 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah.
If they don't know these things about social interaction,
yep,
they won't be able to function, and they will make probably a lot of bad mistakes. So be upfront, be proactive, talk to them about that kind of stuff, because it really does save lives.
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the last ones that I really, this list is pretty good, and I'll add it to the notes, obviously. But the last tip is one that they talk about: seeking professional mental health help, and that works in all sorts of capacities. Myself, I'll admit, we have a family therapist that we meet regularly and talk with regularly. Sometimes it's with our kids. Sometimes it's my wife and I. Sometimes it's a kid and I. This therapist is there for pretty much everything that we go through. And a lot of things for me, I'm a book reader. So I usually will go and take from whatever I've talked about with that therapist, go read a book about stuff to kind of, or reinforce what has been discussed. And then, that allows me to have a little bit better process when I'm negotiating with a terrorist teenager. Sorry. And I think that's where, when from the very beginning of our podcast here, talking to my son and asking him that question is, to be able to have a good conversation with your kid and have that some kind of peace amidst that constant tornado of an age. And then having some kind of therapeutic help, in essence, is he's a testimony to that. He will say that has been the saving grace in our relationship. And I know that there's lots of other people that have the same sort of story there. It has only been because of this, that they've been able to, incorporate some good communication skills, some good, clear conversations, unconditionally loving each other, and having a therapist there to be like, yeah, you guys didn't do that one right. Yeah, you did that one right. Yeah. So,
and just to throw in there, none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. We're idiots. Just the same as everyone else in this world. And as much as we talk about this stuff, it's impossible to adhere to it 100% of the time. I'd say it's impossible to adhere to it 75% of the time.
It really is, yeah.
You get stressed, things happen. And so, but the more we strive to do it, the more we work on it, and the better communication that we have means that when we do lose our cool, when our kids lose their cool, when conflict happens, it's that much easier to get over the conflict. So that after everything is said and done, it's okay. Conflict happens. One of my daughters and I, we butt heads big time. Mm-hmm. Big time. We are way too much alike. And there are times where I just get so stressed out that it's, we yell at each other. And I know it's wrong, but, your brain gets into that stage and it's hard to get out of it. But afterward, when calmer heads prevail, she and I get along. And it's a great relationship. And we both recognize that in each other. And occasionally we'll joke about it. But that's just sometimes how it happens. So don't feel down about yourself if you mess up. You just try harder next time. That's what your teenagers are doing.
Yeah.
That's what every one of us does every single day of our lives. And so it's just that striving to be better, striving to work harder. You'll never be perfect at it. Just work on it. And that communication is really important and part of that process. So, and I did find the name of the author. It is Daniel Siegel, Siegel. So he has a lot of great books. Okay. If you ever want to look anything up for, parenting advice or anything like that, Daniel Siegel does a really good job, and he is an MD.
Cool. I think mentioning about conflict and that kind of stuff, one of the things you want to do is try to seek revenge. There's no reason for you to have revenge on anything, and teach your kids that, seeking revenge is inappropriate. I think last episode we talked about, I was like, yeah, I teach my kids hit for hit. Yes, I do, but I don't be like, okay, no, it doesn't accelerate. Like, it doesn't get worse and worse. It's, it's just, you gave me a dead arm, I get to give you a dead arm, And usually I have to teach my oldest that he is a lot stronger than every single other sibling in the house. So if he does do that, I'm like, now dad gets to give you a dead arm, But the idea is not seeking revenge. Much like monkeys, you shouldn't seek revenge. Uh-oh. But these monkeys did. And they did it in such a weird way. So the story is that there's this India village that basically little town. I can't remember the name of the town here. It's like it's about 300 miles outside of Mumbai, called Lavul. So Lavul has about 5,000 people in there, but there's wild dogs. In India, that's a normal thing to see running around. Here we have animal control. There they just have packs of wild dogs. Well, this pack of wild dogs was a massive pack, and they happened to kill the baby of a local tribe of monkeys, okay, or group, or whatever you call them. I don't know what you call a community of monkeys, okay? So Joe's going to look this up while I'm talking about it. In retaliation for this, these monkeys exterminated the entire pack of dogs. Not in some sort of like, we're going to take you out and transport you to another safer community and refuge where you can live out the rest of your days in this tranquil environment. No, they straight up hauled them to the top, the highest location they could, and threw them off of these stops, killing 250 dogs in this area. Like, insane how this was. So much so it was starting to be like when kids were walking their dogs, these like their domesticated dogs, these monkeys were trying to take the dogs. There was one that actually was the monkey tried to take the kid, and the whole community like chucked a bunch of rocks, and finally, like, it got to a point where this was getting really aggressive. These monkeys are like, well, you guys have fed the dogs, I'm going after. I have no idea the logic behind this, but it takes some real thought to go, okay, you killed my babies, you're all dead to me, you know? And they do it in such a terrible way that they're like, there's even parts where a whole bunch of village, like some of the men in the village, got together to try to fight these monkeys and almost fell off these high locations trying to fight them. Like, I'm like, imagine if that happened and some guy like fell off the roof because he's fighting a monkey. Like,
you know, the only thing I can think right now is I cannot wait until one of the adolescent monkeys starts becoming friends with one of the adolescent dogs, and you see them, you know, walking hand in paw through the village, reuniting. I mean, it's West Side Story, Romeo and Juliet going on here.
I just think Hollywood has to get this and make a Pixar movie out of it or something.
Wow.
Illumination. We should do that one. Yeah, I should recommend it. Be like, hey, angry monkeys getting revenge about these dogs. No, you can't do that because they're throwing these dogs and killing them off. Oh, geez, that's terrible. So anyway, eventually what happened is the local or the nearby forest services were finally paying attention to it after these adult men were, possibly, close to like endangered by fighting monkeys, that they ended up, the Forest Service came in and captured 2 of them. And like literally like Saturday, like this last Saturday, they did this and captured 2 of them and redistributed them, took them. The 2 monkeys were thought to be the aggressors in this. Like they're killed the most puppies, basically. Like I have no, like these, but now they were transported to a local like refuge where they get to live out their days in a tranquil paradise and, whatever it is. But they're like, I just.
Well, fittingly, I did find out what a group of monkeys is called. It's called a troop.
A troop. A troop of monkeys, 2 aggressive monkeys that apparently are serial killers for dogs. So
wow.
I just, the story is so out of the way, like crazy, that I couldn't resist sharing how wild this was. But I'll link it. You can read the full article. It's about a 10-minute read, but it's not bad. It's really quite entertaining. Just the efforts that the local community had to go through just to try to contain this ridiculous problem. And nobody understands, like even talking to, animal professionals, like zoologists go like, this is not normal behavior from even a troop of monkeys or a pack of dogs. Neither one of these, like a wild pack of dogs killing a baby monkey, that's probably normal if the baby monkey was encroaching on some kind of food. Okay, great. They become food. Absolutely. But these guys meditate on this and go back after and exterminate the dogs. That's wild. Like,
they say it's not there, but I mean, I already listed 2 examples in literature of humans doing this, and humans are animals. I mean, we've got the Hatfields and the McCoys. We have a long history, not to mention the Civil War, of conflicts against each other over Civil War was not a slight.
You're like, careful.
But Hatfields and McCoys, the West Side Story,
over some kind of disagreement, or because someone has caused something against
World
another.
War One was a battle of alliances because one person was assassinated.
Yeah.
And that was a world war off of one person's assassination. Now that's an oversimplification, but we see these kinds of behaviors in humans.
Yeah.
I would kind of expect, I'm surprised we don't see it more in the animal kingdom. That is a wild, wild story. Wow.
And I really actually enjoyed coming across an article so violent that wasn't humans. Like, I would give credit to humans doing something like this, like tribes against tribes, sort of a thing. To think that monkeys did this, that takes planning and coordinating, especially for how they took care of these dogs.
They're evolving.
But I think about animal wise, like if you think about crows or ravens, they will often take their critters to the highest height that they can and drop it. And then once it hits the ground, it's dead. And that's how they kill their prey. And that's pretty ingenious. There's not a lot of birds that know how to do that. There's only a few, some hawks that know how to do that, and crows or ravens.
Magpies remember people.
Oh yeah, that's true. Magpies.
Magpie, if you disturb them, every time they see you, they will go after you. They remember people, and they do it maliciously. Magpies are super intelligent.
I wonder if seagulls are in that same sphere.
I don't think so.
They're just kind of mine. There's a reason why they sound dumb in movies too.
No offense to any seagulls that may be listening to this.
True. Seagulls' lives matter. Hey, don't forget, like and subscribe. Leave a comment or two. Tell us what you want to hear. We can talk about pretty much anything. We are idiots. We admit it, and we're happy to guide you in random, hopefully decent directions. We try to. But we would like to hear from you and see what kind of valuable stuff you're interested in. But we've reached the end of our show for the day. Remember, life's too short, so keep laughing and keep learning. And remember, idiots have way more fun.
Check your shoes.